every person who has left will tell you exactly the same thing. I couldn't mention this to my wife. I couldn't mention it to my husband. I couldn't mention it to my friends. I couldn't write it in a letter to my parents because the letters are all read. Phone calls are all listened to. I couldn't do or say anything that would hint to anyone. I just had to plot it out and then make my escape.
Your amazing, fantastic book that I'm really, really enjoying reading, A Billion Years, it starts with a very thrilling escape scene. What a lot of people probably don't know about Scientology, who aren't familiar with it, is that you would have to escape because most religions and things, you go to church on a Sunday, then you go home. How does one escape? Why does one have to escape?
Well, there's sort of two types of Scientologists. There is the people who work for the organization, and then there is the people that pay the money to get the services from the organization. Those people who work for the organization are then split into two categories: the people that work in local Scientology organizations, and then the members of the C organization, which is sort of the inner core elite of Scientology that live and work communally. And in reference to the name of the book, sign a billion-year contract as Sea Org members to commit themselves, essentially committing themselves for eternity to achieving the aims of Scientology. That inner core, the Sea organization, which I was a member of for more than 30 years, is a very, very controlled environment. At the upper echelons, at the very top of Scientology, the facilities that one lives and works in are, patrolled by security forces and have cameras everywhere and are super secure locations that it is difficult to get away from. And if you have enough intention, you can pull it off. Plenty of people have. I'm not the first person who has escaped the Sea organization, but there are enough barriers, both physical and even more mental, to the escape that most people don't. Even if they have a desire to get away or don't want to be there anymore, they can't figure out how to pull it off. They're worried about what they're told about what the outside world is like, that, it's a terrible, horrible place where you're going to end up, dying of cancer after you flip burgers at McDonald's for, the rest of your life. It's portrayed as being the sort of antithesis of everything that Scientology claims to be solving about the world.
Right. And so it's a psychological as well as a physical, to an extent, constraint. And in the book, in that chapter, you say, obviously, you were the person that was stopping people leaving before. And you write, I knew all the tricks. What are these tricks? I suppose, telling people that you're going to work in McDonald's or whatever it might be.
Well, that's mostly the tricks of how you track someone down if they do escape. Because escaping is one thing. Staying escaped is another matter. There is this thing that exists in the Sea organization called the blow drill. And blow is the terminology that is used in Scientology for an unauthorized departure. And the blow drill goes into effect the minute someone who has any sort of prominence or is perceived to be a threat in some fashion takes off. And instantly there is a group of people that go to work to track down where this person is. And they go through, Scientology collects enormous numbers of records and documents and has files on everything. And so a Sea Org member all of their bank accounts, their social security number, the name, their maiden name of their mother, all the information that you need in order to gather information about someone, like where are they spending money on their credit cards, what airlines have they booked on, did they buy a bus ticket, are they in a hotel, can all be found out very quickly. And then if the person is someone important, then a team is sent to go get them back. And usually that consists of someone from the security force, and then whoever it is that might be what is called in Scientology an opinion leader or an influencer for that person. It might be their wife. It might be a child. It might be their boss. Whoever it is, they're sent out to persuade the person to come back. And it's successful more often than not, unfortunately.
Fair gaming, right?
Well, fair gaming is a slightly different thing, Andrew. But yes, that falls under the category. But fair gaming is a term that is developed by Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and he originally said that the enemies of Scientology effectively are fair game. You can do anything to them. You can trick them, you can sue them, you can lie to them, you can beat them up. There is no holds barred on what gets done to seek to destroy an enemy of Scientology. And Hubbard laid out all these methods of how you go about doing this. He wrote them down. Crazily enough, they are written down, and they describe how you harass someone, hire private investigators, frame them, get them fired from their jobs, all of these sort of things.
Kill their pets.
It doesn't say that specifically, but anything goes, literally. And Scientology today says, fair game? Oh, that was canceled way back in the 60s. Fair game doesn't exist. Well, actually, if you read what Hubbard said, he said, we're canceling the use of the term fair game. We are not changing how we treat enemies of Scientology. So in order to try and deal with the bad public relations that they were getting from this fair game business, he said, don't use those words anymore, but keep doing the same stuff. So they continue to do the same stuff, and I and others like Leah Remini and various other former members of Scientology call that still fair game, because that is what it is.
And there's stuff about you, isn't there? And Leah, there's all sorts of stuff online, and previous ex-Scientologists I've interviewed. There's stuff all about them that Scientologists have written that is slanderous. And what's it like to read that stuff about yourself? And is there part of you? Is it almost like an initiation of leaving? Like, okay, I got my thing.
Yes, it is. I mean, they're pretty proficient at their smears. They have, purchased hundreds, if not thousands, of URLs so that they can have who is Mike Rinder and who is Leah Remini, and Leah Remini sucks and Mike Rinder's an asshole.com. And they put up routine posts on social media, and they shoot these videos. The vast majority of ones about me come from my daughter and ex-wife, unfortunately, and I talk at great length about that in the book. They are being, observant, obedient, good Scientologists, doing what they are doing, reading scripts into a video camera. But what's so crazy about this, Andrew, is they also pay for Google ads. Like if you search my name or my book or Leah Remini, or what comes up as the number one item is a paid ad. Who is Mike Rinder? Hear the real story about him being a wife beater, a child abuser, a liar, a thief, a no good nothing. That those things, and hiring private investigators and lawyers to threaten people and paying for these ads and the production of these videos, is being subsidized by the United States taxpayers, because Scientology is tax exempt. So if you pay taxes, a little portion of your taxes are going to support those activities of Scientology, which is, in my view, the primary reason why Scientology should not be a tax-exempt religious organization.
Absolutely right. I think so. I mean, is it just on a feeling level? I know you know that they're reading out a script, but to see your daughter saying those kinds of things about you, what does that feel like?
It sucks. I mean, it's terrible. And what's sort of so terrible about it is what I write in the beginning of the book. I mean, my book is addressed to the two children that I brought into the Scientology world and were raised in the Sea Organization, because I feel a responsibility for having put them in the position that they are in now, where they don't really have any free will, and they can't make the choices that they should be able to make. They're not informed about what's really going on. And so I see them and I feel a sort of mixture of kind of horror and sadness and pity, and guilt. It's a lot of mixed emotions. But this book is sort of an attempt to do something else to change that circumstance. I feel bad about where they are and the life that they are living. I don't deny that. I mean, I say in the book, look, if you want to be a Scientologist, if you want to be in the SEAL, that's totally fine by me. It's okay. You're adults now. You can make your own decisions, but you need to be informed. You see the world through the eyes of Scientology that has been hammered into you since the day you were born. And that brainwashing, that culture of living inside the bubble of Scientology creates an extraordinarily distorted view of the world and an extraordinarily distorted view of me. So that's what the book is trying to explain. Who am I? What did I go through? What was my thought process? How did I come to the conclusion that I needed to escape? How did I get there in the first place? So hopefully they will one day read it and be able to understand a little bit about me. I also hope that other people who have not been in Scientology, maybe in some other organization or in a difficult relationship or a difficult work situation, see something in what I've written that will help them. You know, I say at the beginning, it's never too late to change your life. I escaped from Scientology and walked out the door in London with absolutely nothing when I was 52 years old. I had never held a job outside of Scientology. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any real friends. I had nothing outside the world of Scientology. And I literally started from nothing. And that's what this book chronicles, is sort of that journey.
Do you hold out much hope to get a phone call one day from, a family member in Scientology saying, hey, I'm out as well, let's go for coffee? Of
course. Of course. If I didn't have any hope, then I wouldn't be doing this. I hope that will happen. I look to myself again as an example. I was a very, very senior official in Scientology for a long, long time. I was on the board of the Church of Scientology International. I was the international spokesperson for Scientology. If you had surveyed Scientologists and said, do you think Mike Rinder will ever leave Scientology? They would have all said no, and probably I would have said no for a long part of that journey that I went on, but eventually I did. So, you know, I'm the poster child for how anything is possible.
Could even Tom Cruise leave?
Yes, he could, although I don't know that he has. I don't see the circumstances that bring about the sort of enforced straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, that you go, okay, I can't take this anymore. There's nothing that could be worse than the life that I am currently living, and I gotta get out of here. I don't see that happening with him.
Yeah, his life seems pretty okay. I think as you say, people were very surprised you left because you were so high up, and it's what is quite remarkable about you. I mean, you worked at one stage directly under L. Ron Hubbard, the creator of Scientology. Take me back to those days. You'd first gotten onto the Sea Org, the boat that goes around. What was it like, the initial days?
Well, I described them in the book. It was pretty rough to begin with. I was raised like it was almost a preordained destiny for me to go into the Sea organization. My parents were very avid Scientologists, and it was kind of the thing to do, to go work with the founder of Scientology, and that was a very, very sort of prestigious thing to, it was like going to the Vatican and becoming a bishop in the Vatican. I was like at the top. But unlike walking into the Vatican, walking in onto the Apollo, which was the name of the ship that Hubbard was sailing on, was like, I described the living conditions as like the black hole of Calcutta. It was pretty rough. But Sea Org members are conditioned to accept a lot of physical deprivations in the cause of achieving these altruistic goals of Scientology, these huge, we're going to save the planet and every man, woman, and child on it, and we are the only people that can, and, all the great, there's been sacrifice throughout the ages. The Roman legions that built the Roman Empire suffered enormous hardships to accomplish what they accomplished, and Sea Org members have to suffer enormous hardships. And what's important is not your physical comfort, but that fact that you're getting your job done and doing something to save the planet. So it was an interesting, thrown off the deep end of the pier into the very cold waters of life in the Sea Org. Hubbard himself was a very interesting character. I mean, he was charismatic. He was larger than life. He was, sort of hail fellow, well met, slap on the back, big laugh, but also very mercurial in his mood swings. And he could get extraordinarily mad and angry and yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs. It took a long time for me, Andrew. I left and escaped from the Sea organization in 2007, and I still, even after escaping, considered myself to be a Scientologist. I still believe that Hubbard was, in some fashion, a guru who had found answers to life, and that took me longer to sort of sort through what was true and what was false about him and his legacy, his teachings. And, I talk about that at some length in the book too, about, I escaped because I found the conditions and the insanities of the person who took over after Hubbard died, David Miscavige, to be completely out of control. But I didn't believe that what Hubbard had said was all wrong, and that Miscavige was actually perverting that, and that had Hubbard still been around, things would have been very different, and I wouldn't have escaped. So the big turning point for me with respect to Hubbard was reading Russell Miller's unauthorized biography of him, Madman or Messiah, which was very, very eye-opening to me and explained a lot of the experiences that I had had with Hubbard. Today, I would say Hubbard was a great storyteller, and he told many, 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 many stories that were complete and utter fabrications and or embellishments or whatever in the course of his dissertations about Scientology, and claimed, he'd done scientific experiments that proved this, and that he had tested this on that, and all of Scientology, he called it a technology. He doesn't refer to what he wrote and spoke about Scientology as teachings or parables or, something of interest. He refers to it as technology. The idea being that if you take what he says and do it exactly and precisely, it will work 100% of the time. And this is what Scientologists believe. They believe that Hubbard's writings and words are absolute truth that is brilliant, no matter what it is or what it says, from how to wash windows to how to take someone in a psychotic break and calm them down and bring them back to sanity. So it's very interesting to me to understand now that Scientology is basically a continuation of his career as a storyteller and writer of fiction.
Well, yeah, even as far as I think there were examples of, you get cancer because you didn't smoke enough cigarettes or that kind of thing. And he had did he have horrible teeth as well?
Yes, he did. He hated dentists. He hated doctors. He had, it's sort of the most obvious thing about Hubbard that Scientologists are sort of taught to ignore or set aside. He was not a healthy person, and yet he claimed Dianetics could solve all physical problems. You throw away your glasses, you can throw away your canes, you'll be able to walk, it'll cure you of arthritis, it'll cure you of cancer, it'll cure you of everything. And he ended up a complete physical wreck. He claims that Scientology makes relationships work and marriages work. And he had terrible familial relationships. He abandoned his first wife. He claimed his second wife didn't exist. He married her bigamously. He disowned his daughter that he had with her and said she wasn't his daughter. His other children abandoned Scientology, all except for one. One committed suicide because of the stigma of being gay. I mean, his family life is an American horror story. And yet you ask a Scientologist and they will tell you that the PR from Hubbard is, we have the technology to make relationships work, all relationships. We can make marriages work. There's even a film that he wrote and scripted that got shot about how to save a marriage. And it works 100% of the time if you do what Hubbard said. Don't do what he did, do what he said. So this is sort of the big conundrum of Scientology. How do smart people become so stupid?
What was going through your mind when there were these some obvious contradictions, like some of these things. You're seeing him on the boat. He's wandering around looking unhealthy and horrible and talking about health and stuff. So what goes through your head at that point?
There's something that I don't totally understand yet. There's something that I haven't yet, hasn't been revealed to me yet that explains this. Or, well, it doesn't really matter because he claims, I'm not a god, I'm just a man. Well, while presenting himself really as a god, not saying I am God, but saying my word is the word of God, you must follow it. And Scientologists believing that. But there is this term called thought stopping. And it is a term that is used in, psychology and I don't know if psychiatry, but psychology certainly, of how someone manages to block out the cognitive dissonance that is apparent to everybody else around them. And there are numerous, Scientology is like a masterwork on the subject of thought stopping. How do you explain anything and everything that is a question or a criticism or a pointing out of, obviously crazy stuff? How do you explain all that? There are explanations for everything in Scientology, like detailed explanations. And they're very, very effective.
And there's, speaking of that cognitive dissonance, the funny thing about Scientology, well, one of the funny things, you very rarely hear anyone talk about Xenu. I've spoken to many ex-Scientologists. I've listened to lots of stuff, read lots of stuff. You rarely hear any mention of Lord Xenu or any of the religious scripture, so to speak, around Scientology. Does that suggest that it was all just sort of decoration? Did people just not really believe any of that? It was just a bit of fiction to add to the whole thing?
No. Scientologists believe that 100%. And I write about my experience with that in the book and what happened and why I started to believe it. And Scientologists to this day, the people who have attained that level in Scientology, which takes you a while to get there before you're deemed to be spiritually in shape to be able to experience the story of Xenu, I describe how that sort of went down for me. There is one of Hubbard's greatest inventions was this thing called the E-meter, which is this device that's sort of like a lie detector that's used in Scientology, and it's sort of a meter with a dial on it, and you hold these cans in your hand, and a little electrical current passes through your body and is registers on this meter. Scientologists believe absolutely without doubt that the E-meter never lies. And Hubbard had another piece of genius, which was the E-meter reads, or the needle reacts, below your level of consciousness. So you may not be aware of something, but if the meter is reacting, it exists. And you see these, and everybody in Scientology experiences these scenarios where they are sitting down on an E-meter, and there is another fundamental principle of Scientology of going back to the earliest time when something began, regression theory. And it's, that's not that uncommon in the field of mental studies. But in Scientology, you have this E-meter. So if you're supposed to be finding the earliest part of something happening to you that you're trying to deal with that's a negative impact on your life, and you get to well, I was 2 years old, and that's the first time I can recall. Well, there's still something that you need to come up with, so close your eyes and think of what it could be. And oh, well, I'm getting this thought about, I'm carrying a spear, and okay, yeah, that's reading. Okay, so When was that? Oh gosh, I don't know. When was it? I don't know. The 1700s? I don't know. And the auditor, the person that is using the e-meter, will guide you and tell you, yes, that is what it is, because it says so on the e-meter. And this creates these sort of memories that you go, this seems like total bullshit to me. And then the person is going, well, no, it's reading on the meter. Okay, well, I guess it is. And that's what happens with the OT3 story about, the evil galactic leader, Lord Xenu, gathering together souls, 2 billion, and packaging them in glycol and putting them on DC-8 rocket ships and sending them to Earth and dropping them in volcanoes and blowing them up with H-bombs. That's the basic, quick, 30-second version of what that story is, and that those beings are now stuck to every person on planet Earth, and they're called body thetans, and thetan is the Scientology term for spirit, and that by auditing now, you can address those thetans and remove them from your body. And you go, oh my God, this sounds ridiculous. This is just so bizarre. Well, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe what Run says. What does the meter say? So you sit down on the e-meter and you start getting reads and you go, oh, well, maybe that is, because the meter's saying maybe I'm just not aware enough yet to understand this. I'll keep working at it and I will get there. And that's the sort of, in a nutshell, how one buys into the bullshit.
You then, fully believed, and you thought you'd have 1 billion years. You came out, what was it, 52, were you?
Yes.
So then had to contend with the fact that rather than 1 billion, you had a little bit less than that. How did that feel?
I was very relieved. I wasn't looking forward to 1 billion years of doing that shit.
Yeah, but you were out. How exciting. Wow, what an amazing world on the outside.
It was very exciting. I try to describe what my feelings were when I got on the tube, because I was in London and I got on the tube at Warren Street and I got off on Piccadilly and I was like, okay, I'm feeling a freedom that I have not felt at any time in my life. Like, literally. I suddenly had the freedom to do, think, say, and be anything that I wanted, and without any restrictions. On the other hand, that freedom is also a bit scary, because I didn't know what to do, be, or where to go, or what. It was like oh my God, how am I going to navigate my way through the world? And I was worried. I was worried that they were going to find me. I went to great lengths to make sure that they didn't. I was worried about the consequences on my children and wife at the time, that they would in some way be punished for what I had done. And also my mother and my brother and my sister and, everybody else in my family. So there was a lot of mixed emotions, but I guess the biggest one was the relief of feeling the first sort of moments of freedom. I guess it's sort of like someone that comes out of prison. They just walk out and suddenly they can go to a restaurant. They can eat what they want. They can sleep when they want. Nobody's herding them around. So it was very liberating from that perspective.
Would you have previously, when you were in Scientology, punished the family of somebody who had left?
Well, what happens, Andrew, is that they get pulled in and put on the e-meter and sec-checked, which is the Scientology term security checking. It is being interrogated on the e-meter to find out what they knew, because Scientology is a snitch culture. And if you don't report on something that you believe to be a departure from what's acceptable in Scientology, and it gets discovered subsequently, you are considered to be just as guilty as the person that committed the act and are punished the same as the person who committed the act. So I was fearful, and this happens all the time, that they would be pulled in and be going, well, you know, we thought maybe he might leave, or we didn't report the fact that he said, you know, I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I didn't have any control over it, so that sort of made it more worrisome.
Were you able to say goodbye or to, you know, in any way hint to your family or friends there, like, listen, I might be out of here soon?
No. Nobody does that. If you do that even to your wife, you're going to get reported on instantly, and then you will be locked down with a security guard outside a door watching you 24/7. It's not, you can't let on even an inkling. And every person who has left will tell you exactly the same thing. Nope, I couldn't mention this to my wife. I couldn't mention it to my husband. I couldn't mention it to my friends. I couldn't say anything to anybody. I couldn't write it in a letter to my parents because the letters are all read. I couldn't make a phone call because the phone calls are all listened to. I couldn't do or say anything that would hint to anyone. I just had to plot it out and then make my escape.
You must have felt a lot of conflicting feelings and a lot of guilt for the people who are going to wake up and suddenly see, you know, where's Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, I also cover in the book that once I managed to get back to the United States, and I ended up going and living temporarily with David Miscavige's elder brother and his wife. They were my best friends and had been my friend. Biddy, his wife, I had known since the days of the Apollo. And Ronnie, I had known for a very, very long time. I knew the whole family, his dad, his mom, his sisters, everybody. So I went to live with them after I escaped from London. And Biddy was very close friends with my ex-wife. And she said, you need to write to Kathy and tell her that she needs to come here so that we can sit down and talk to her. And if she decides that she doesn't want to leave the Sea Organization, fine, but at least we'll know that we've had a chance to talk to her, and maybe Benjamin and Taryn, my two elder children, can come with her. So I wrote this letter and I said, Betty, I don't think this is going to work. And she said, well, you got to give it a try. I think maybe Kathy will come. I wrote the letter and I got a handwritten note back from Kathy, my ex-wife, that said, Dear Mike, I received your letter. Fuck you. I'll tell the kids. Divorce papers are being put together. Kathy. That was it. I mean, there was a couple more sentences, but, you know, I think I put the whole thing in the book. It's just like instantaneously any good Scientologist will take that attitude about someone like me who has left.
Sure. I mean, if she'd said, okay, I'll come and meet, that would be tantamount to saying I'm leaving as well,
I'm leaving.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't be allowed to. So there's many catch-22s in this world of Scientology.
It must, as sad, you know, that's the sad side. I can imagine when you get to have a reunion with somebody who left 5-10 years before you, or 5-10 years after you, that must be elation. Like, we're both out now and we can meet in the outside world.
It's absolutely amazing, Andrew. The people who I then hooked up with, who I had not seen since they had left the Sea Org, and then subsequently people who left after me who reached out, is a community that is sort of like unlike anything. Well, I analogize it to, you know, people that were in an infantry division in the war, and went through these horrendous experiences, survived, and now are on the other side, and they have a bond that nobody outside of that little group can really understand. And for the longest time, the only way, because many people that leave the Sea Org are like second-generation Scientologists. Many people in the Sea Org are second-generation Scientologists like I was. And they don't have anybody to go back to. They walk out and that's it. They're on their own in the world, except for if they can find former members of the Sea Org to kind of team up with, which is what I did, which is what many of people have done. And so knowing that, a bunch of us formed this organization called the Aftermath Foundation, named after the TV show that Leah and I did, which is a network now of people and resources available for people escaping Scientology. So, and hopefully it will continue to grow, and we will be able to make this into a network that is able to help people escaping any sort of similar organization. But yes, that the world of former Sea Org members, particularly former Sea Org members who were at the highest echelons of Scientology, is a pretty tight-knit group.
How did you get in touch with Leah? That's Leah Remini, who was in The King of Queens. People even in the UK will know that one. I used to watch it. How did you get about, did you know each other before, or was that an after thing? And then you made that podcast, Fair Game, which I would encourage people to listen to if you want to know more as well.
Well, I had met Leah when I was in Scientology. I talk about where we met and when and how. I was introduced to her by Lisa Marie Presley, as a matter of fact. But then after she left, she first reached out to another woman who had left, a sort of a famous Sea Org member called Debbie Cook. And Debbie Cook had left, and kind of everybody knew Debbie Cook just because of the position that she had held. And Leah had reached out to Debbie, and Debbie had told her, given Leah my phone number, and Leah called me and asked me for my advice. And this was actually before Leah had officially left Scientology. She was still trying to navigate her way through the minefield of getting out. And though she had already, made her infamous inquiry as to where's Shelley, the wife of David Miscavige, who had been vanished and disappeared by him, she was undergoing, quote, handlings by Scientology and was becoming increasingly disillusioned with what was happening. And so reached out to me because she had been told, I was this, like they started piling on me and piling on Debbie, and she wanted to hear what we had to say about it. And so that was kind of the start. And then she then wrote her book and asked me to, if I could help check some of the facts in there and, Scientology terminology. And then subsequent to that, the Aftermath program started when another one of my friends who had left the Sea Org, Amy Scobie, her mother was on her deathbed, and Amy reached out to Leah, and Leah sent a camera crew to film the mother on her deathbed, and that became the first episode of the Aftermath. And Leah asked me to help her, and I said yes, of course. And so, 3 seasons and 37 episodes and 2 Emmys later, we told a lot of stories about the real experiences that people have had in Scientology.
What happens, I suppose, hypothetically, when you've got a Hollywood actor, someone like Leah Remini or I don't know, other big Hollywood actors who have left Scientology, and they end up at an award ceremony, and there's Tom Cruise, and is it Elizabeth Moss from The Handmaid's Tale? Would they just not go? Would there be a fight, or just not look at each other?
Well, it's both. I've experienced both. Leah and I were at an awards show, I think the TV Producers Awards or the TV Critics Awards or something, and we were nominated, and so was Handmaid's Tale, and Elizabeth Moss was sitting at a table like four tables removed from us, studiously ignoring us. And, neither Leah or I wanted to get up and kind of go make her feel uncomfortable. It wasn't really the right place to do that. But when our category came up, she got up and left the room and went wherever she went. She claimed later on she just had to go to the bathroom, but she wasn't there because she couldn't be put in a position of having to stand up and applaud when we won. And another time we were at another Emmy event, and Sneaky Pete was nominated, and Bryan Cranston was there, and Vonnie Ribisi is the other sort of lead in Sneaky Pete. And Leah and I are there, and we're all supposed to be going on stage to talk about the shows, and it was like a Q&A session or something. And Bryan Cranston's out there, and we're like, "Hi, Bryan, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Congratulations, for being nominated." And he's congratulating us. "Hey, where's Vonnie?" He heard you were going to be here, so he couldn't come.
Oh, I've just looked him up. I know who he is. I've seen him in loads of things. What have I seen him in?
Yeah, he's a second-generation Scientologist, and, his sister is Marissa Ribisi. I mean, the whole family is like, his mother is the manager of I don't know, Erica Christensen. I didn't even remember who all the names are, but the Ribisi family is Scientology sort of celebrity royalty in the LA area. And, he, like so many others, Elizabeth Moss is another second-generation Scientologist. Danny Masterson is another second-generation Scientologist. They have an entire world. Not just their family, their entourage, their friends. They're all Scientologists, and they can't, step out of the party line, so they have to be careful. They have to be careful about what happens when they get interviewed, when asked questions. They have to be careful about what they do when they go to awards presentations. It's like a minefield to navigate your way through. And if you want to remain in good standing with Scientology, you don't want to ever do anything that would indicate that you had anything other than scorn and contempt for Leah Remini and Mike Rinder.
Well, and vice versa, I suppose. You guys, and do you then feel like you want to say to certain directors, someone like Spielberg, you don't have to work with Tom Cruise. You're Steven Spielberg, right? You can have any actor. It can be anyone. Would you want to say to them, like, this guy is in charge of a cult that commits abuses?
Well, certainly. I mean, I write about Steven Spielberg and what happened to him and Tom Cruise's efforts, and they all backfired because of Scientology's insane views about psychiatry. And, I covered that in the book. But certainly, I think that journalists and people that work with, particularly Tom Cruise, who is a poster child for Scientology, he has sort of made a thing about how he has credited Scientology for his success. And, David Miscavige has lauded him for getting so many people into Scientology and helping to get so many people in. And I believe he has a responsibility to also be truthful about the abuses that are ongoing in Scientology, and that journalists shouldn't agree to interview Tom Cruise on the condition that they not ask him any negative questions about Scientology.
That there were two sort of famous interviews, weren't there? There was a Lowry one and Overton one in Australia. That was oh God, what did he say? I can't remember in that one. But the first one was about psychiatry. He had this big debate, and it's all over YouTube, this video, and he really gets very angry about it. But and I think he even makes some relatively good points about, over prescribing Ritalin and things like that. But what he doesn't say is what the alternative is. He doesn't say, whereas in your book, there's a particularly difficult scene, I suppose, with somebody who's been put inside a room on the boat. So what is the Scientology line on or what to do with someone who's psychotic?
Well, unfortunately, Hubbard believed that he had invented the answer for psychosis, which is to lock someone up, not speak to them, not have any noise going on in their environment until they calm down, and then you put them on an e-meter and you do particular steps on this e-meter. Hubbard, quote, researched this on one man on the Apollo, and then wrote this extensive dissertation about how he has developed the only method of solving psychosis, and that now there is no longer any reason for psychiatry to exist on planet Earth. And it was all based on this one guy. And why he calmed down, who knows? I mean, he was a raging madman for many days and violent, and, I guess he ran out of energy in part. He didn't eat, but that's just my speculation as to what happened. But what I know what happened is Hubbard then wrote this lengthy thing saying, here is how you treat someone in a state of psychosis. And the terrible, horrible subsequent result of that is the infamous death of a woman named Lisa McPherson at the Fort Harrison Hotel, the Clearwater spiritual headquarters of Scientology, many years later, who was, in theory, being treated for her psychotic episode with Hubbard's, what he called, introspection rundown. And she ultimately went for days and days and days getting no treatment, no real care, and when they finally decided that she needed to be taken to a hospital, they drove her to a hospital 45 minutes away rather than the one that was within a mile, and she was dead upon arrival. And there is a lot more to this story, and there's a whole chapter in the book about it. And I say in there, this could be the subject of an entire book. I reduced it to a chapter. It is a fairly lengthy chapter, nevertheless, but this is what I was talking about earlier, Andrew, this idea that there is a technology in Scientology, that if you just do the technology exactly as Ron says, it will work 100% of the time. So if you do exactly what Ron says to this woman, clearly in a psychotic episode and in great distress and in a state of virtual physical collapse, but don't go to the doctor, don't take her to a hospital, do what Ron says. And what Ron says is blah, 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 and they kept doing quote unquote what Ron says, and the net result was she didn't get any other form of treatment. Now, it's possible that she could have died based on she did have a pulmonary embolism that kills a lot of people. She could have died even if she had been in a hospital. Tons of people die of pulmonary embolisms in the hospital. But we shall never know, because she wasn't taken to a hospital. She was kept in a hotel room at the Fort Harrison Hotel and guarded to prevent her from escaping, and theoretically kept in a quiet, peaceful environment and she's no longer with us.
I've heard similar, rumors, I suppose, about John Travolta's son, and they didn't go for medication that might have helped.
Well, I don't know what the circumstances are with respect to Jet, but certainly I know that Scientologists are absolutely 100% opposed to psychiatric drugs, mind-altering drugs of any description, whether street drugs or psychiatric prescribed drugs, are all bad, taboo in Scientology, and they are not to be used. They are seen as an easy, ineffective solution that creates more problems than it solves. That's why you hear Tom Cruise going off on Matt Lauer about Brooke Shields taking antidepressants for her postpartum depression. And he claims to be the world's expert on this because every Scientologist is the world's expert when it comes to anything that they have learned from Ron Hubbard. So he calls Matt Lauer glib and says, you don't know, and I do, and you're unaware, and blah, 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 blah. And Matt Lauer keeps trying to ask him the question, but Tom, is it possible that someone could be helped by these things? Like, there are people that say it helps them. Is that not true? And he just sort of ignores him and blurts on with, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad. And this is, Scientology think in a nutshell. Hubbard says psychiatric drugs are bad, so we all know they are, and we will never, ever use them.
Did you meet or know Tom Cruise or John Travolta?
Oh, yeah. I talk about a lot in the book. I met Tom Cruise many times. In fact, I was the first person that Tom Cruise asked or complained that his sister couldn't find him a girlfriend, which ultimately ended up in the search for a girlfriend for Tom Cruise that began with Nazanin Boniadi and then ultimately ended up with Katie Holmes, which was documented in a marvelous piece for Vanity Fair by Maureen Orth called "What Did Katie Know?" or "What Didn't Katie Know?" What did or what didn't? One or the other. Anybody can look it up. But I had a lot of interactions with John Travolta. I mean, I talk about him. He gave me the script for Pulp Fiction and asked me if he should do the movie. And the genius I am, I told him no. I said it would be a big mistake.
Why?
Because I told him it's unbecoming of a Scientologist to play a heroin-addicted assassin. That is not a good look for a Scientologist.
And yet he did it.
Yes, he did. He was smarter than me.
But also, they're different rules, I suppose, because if somebody wasn't a celebrity, went against your advice at that time, it wouldn't have been good for them, presumably.
Yes, that's exactly right, Andrew. But also, had the movie been a flop, he probably would have been in trouble because he had been told beforehand, don't do it. But because it was a huge success and revitalized his career, it was like, okay, no problem. Everybody knows it's just a role, so it's not really an issue.
It's a phenomenal film.
It is a phenomenal film. He's a phenomenal actor. Like, the best actor that has been or is in Scientology, in my view, is John Travolta. I mean, for a while, John Travolta was the shit, man. And when he wore a white suit, everybody started buying white suits. When he wore a cowboy hat, everybody started wearing cowboy hats and doing the two-step. When, he got into fitness, everybody was down at the gym doing their jumping jacks with the disco music. When he was Grease, everybody loved Grease. I mean, he was he was very iconic, and he created the trends in society unlike probably any other movie star in history. In fact, I try to be as objective as I can in this book. I try not to say things that I think are just for sensationalistic purposes. I like John Travolta. I feel sorry that he is sort of enmeshed in this web that he doesn't seem to be able to find his way out of. But he is a nice man. Not the same with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is a phony nice man.
I've heard that so often, and because when you hear people say that, you always think, okay, well, that's that person's opinion, because you should never take just what someone's. You should always think, okay, but everyone says that John Travolta seems like a really nice guy who's maybe fallen for the wrong things, and that Tom Cruise is just not good.
Yeah, he's Tom Cruise has a surface persona that is, over the top handshakes and huggies and wow and enthusiasm and this and that. And behind the scenes is a much less endearing character.
And what about you? I mean, at your worst, let's say, when you were fully on board with the cult, I mean, do you look back with guilt at some of the things you did?
Fuck yes. Absolutely. It's, there are many places in this book where I do not look good. And, it's sort of the unvarnished, here is what I was doing. And I try and explain my thought processes, but that doesn't really make some of the things that I did less reprehensible. I mean, I feel a real sense of guilt for a lot of things that I did. Yes. And I've sought to apologize to a lot of people and reached out to a lot of people. Obviously, I can't reach out to everybody, but the book is also in part an attempt to atone for some of those things and explain them and let people know what it was that I was doing and why I was doing it.
What do you think is there one thing that sticks out to you, one moment in particular that brings guilt?
Yeah, I think that probably the story of Bob Minton, who came along, never been a Scientologist, and took up the cause of the death of Lisa McPherson and became a real headache to us in Scientology. And I basically oversaw the fair game efforts to destroy Bob Minton and got all of his money that he had frozen through it's a long circuitous story, but he eventually couldn't take the pressure and basically caved in. And subsequent to my leaving Scientology, I honestly became friends with Bob and his partner at the time, Stacy. And unfortunately, Bob passed away. Stacy's still around, a lovely, lovely person who I have spent a lot of time reminiscing with. But the things that were done to this guy who had no dog in the fight. He was just a decent fellow who thought that some injustice and something was wrong and started providing funding for people to protest and bring attention to what he believed were things that were abuses in Scientology. He became the subject of an inordinately intense campaign to silence him through intimidation, through following him, through trying to stage and provoke him into acts of violence, which would get him arrested. And it was a whole very nasty nasty experience, and I go into some details about it in the book because I figured it was sort of the coming together of all the worst in one thing.
Well, we talk a lot about cognitive bias and cult ideology and stuff on this podcast, and I think what's brilliant about your book as well is you're so taken inside the world of Scientology from you as a young age. You really see it through your eyes, and we sort of journey in there with you, and you're just hanging out with a bunch of people, and it just feels like you're on some sort of holiday camp or something, or working together, and you can see how it happens, and I think you can empathize. So where can, the usual places, I imagine, where people can get your book, and where do you want to send them as well, Twitter and stuff?
Oh, well, you can get the book in bookstores or on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble or through the Simon & Schuster website. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I have a daily blog, MikeRindersblog.org, where I sort of write about things that are of interest to me about Scientology, or trying to explain things about Scientology, or talk about my book or whatever. But generally, I hope that the book reaches a wider audience than those who think they just want to know about Scientology. I hope that it becomes like my hope for my book. And I don't think that I can ever achieve the brilliance of Tara Westover in her phenomenal book, Educated. But that became something that people look to understand how you can get completely immersed in a crazy world, and it seemed perfectly normal to you. And then how can you get yourself out of that? And I hope that it helps people to realize that it's possible to get out.
Who's that on the cover? Is that you?
Yes, sir. That's me when I was 18, right when I joined the Sea Org.
Very handsome but very androgynous as well.
Well, I don't know that I've ever been called androgynous before. That's a first. I guess so. I look kind of girly on there.
I think you look like Amanda Knox.
Oh, you're too involved with Amanda Knox, Andrew.
I know. I'm obsessed with Amanda Knox. She's been on here twice. I've been on her podcast. I'm fascinated by the whole thing. And now I'm seeing her in the eyes of Mike Rinder.
Oh, that's funny.
Hi, I'm Andrew Gold, former BBC journalist. I got a little tired of restrictions over who I could interview and what I could say and do, so I made this channel. Click this playlist here, and I'll be seeing you on the edge.